The Westland District Library where I work used to have much more extensive opening hours, but the gentlemen had to take their hats off and they were not allowed to spit on the floor. I ended up at Westland District Library after spending a year, 2018 to 2019, as the New Zealand Wikipedian at large, travelling the whole of the country, working with institutions like scientific research institutions, magazines, libraries, including a couple of months at the National Library. And at the end of it, I was offered a position as digital discovery librarian at Westland District Library, full funded under the New Zealand Library's partnership program administered by the National Library under an 18-month contract. I've been there since November, so I'll like to walk you through what sort of things we've accomplished in a year. When I first walked into the library, I noticed that it had a lot of copies of the Luminaries. In fact, it turns out it has more translations of the Luminaries than any other library in the world. And I just thought, okay, that sounds like an interesting little project. So I created Wikidata items for all of them. Wikidata is the open database that underpins Wikipedia. So all the translations of the Luminaries are now in Wikidata, all the information about them. I also went to the article itself about the book to see if it could be expanded and managed to recruit a volunteer who was based in London, in fact, a New Zealand literature fan, who was happy to work on improving and expanding the article. So now it's quite a lot better than it was. And she was also happy to work on the article about Eleanor Catton. I, in turn, approached Eleanor Catton's publishers and asked them for any images, and they were happy to release this photo of Catton just before she was awarded the Man Booker Prize under an open license, so it could be uploaded into Wikimedia Commons, which is the image library that supplies Wikipedia, and used in the article. So that's Wikidata, Wikipedia, Wikimedia Commons project, all based on what I saw when I first walked into the library on my first day on the job. So to continue with these sorts of projects, we set up a task force, the West Coast Task Force, only because task force is a very cool thing to belong to. It's a volunteer Wikipedia project that anyone can sign up for. If you sign up, you get a little sandfly for your user page, because sandflies are the official insect of the West Coast. We've run volunteer training events and regular meetups in both Greymouth and Hokitika. We've nominated articles to work on, important sources. This all fits into the regular Wikipedia volunteer meetups that are happening elsewhere in New Zealand. Probably there's one near you. So if you're wanting to work with Wikipedia volunteers, this is a good place to start. So the West Coast Task Force has been able to have actual physical meetups, at least until COVID, which is really important if you're trying to get volunteers trained and help them support each other if they get stuck. And one of the things that they've been able to do has been work on projects like Libraries of the West Coast. So our goal was to try and get every library in the coast into an article and find photographs and information on its history. And this is expanded into an oral history project and an archival project with the libraries themselves digging through their collections to find documentation of their history. Another project has been one on West Coast artists to try and improve the visibility of artists on the coast. And we started with a short list of 10 artists drawn up in collaboration with the art community and the Left Bank Art Gallery in Greymouth. So we wanted to make articles about all of those, something like this. So this is a nice, extensive article about the tapestry artist Marilyn Ree Menzies. But what's notable about it is that it includes not just photos of her, but photos of her copyrighted work, which could only be done because we worked with her to authorize the release of a sample of images for a gallery on the page. And only the artist can release those copyrights. So it's really important to be working with the local artist community to do these sorts of things. We did this with several more artists, and there was such an interest in the project that I ended up running a copyright workshop, which turned out to be an online copyright workshop during lockdown, specifically for the art and photography community, to talk them through this process and explain how New Zealand copyright law works and how they could release sample images of their work to be used by anyone, especially in Wikipedia galleries. So as well as those artist images, we've organised volunteer photography of lots of the West Coast. So this is Hokitika, where we had the New Zealand's first Wikipedia conference, tiny conference, back in March, and the halcyon days again before lockdown, where the volunteers were able to fan out and take photographs of the local cemetery and historic buildings and the township of Ross and the artwork on the beach and so forth. So these are now a pretty large collection depicting all different facets of the town, all done by volunteers. And this ranges from important historic buildings, which now have been put into Wikidata, have a locality, have a photo available. And all of this can be done by anyone just doing a silly little lockdown walk. And I've in fact run a couple of online training sessions aimed at people who want something to do in lockdown. They can take a camera and they can photograph places of interest or parks or local historic buildings in their neighbourhood and upload and donate those photos to Wikimedia Commons. And something else we were photographing is all of the public art in Hokitika has now been photographed. Particularly, of course, tourists love to take photos of the beach sign, but there's numerous other public artwork there. And now, in a collaboration with the local artist group and the Hokitika Museum, we're blogging an account and a history and details about every public artwork in Hokitika that we can now reference and use in Wikipedia articles. That all grew up from this project. So this is something that any volunteer that's interested in photography could be involved in. And you could imagine a photography group getting right into this and documenting their entire town. Another Wikimedia project that we've had volunteers involving with is Wikisource. Wikisource is a small Wikipedia project designed to digitize out-of-copyright books and pamphlets and make them available online as digital editions and eventually as EPUB ebooks. So as you can see, we've managed to get through quite a few decent-sized books since February. We have plenty more in the queue. These are all works that generally have already been scanned, in fact, by the Internet Archive or by Google Books or by Hathi Trust, or we've scanned some of them by hand because there were no other copies available. And they are all usually quite important out-of-print works, that some of which we only had locked away in a reference cabinet in our history room. So they were not available for loan or generally not accessed by anyone. And that's all changed now because we take a book like Banking Under Difficulties, which is a pretty important early history of the coast. All of the pages from the scanned edition have now been checked by at least 2 different people. That's what the green means. And the volunteers can pretty quickly learn how to compare the scanned page with the OCR'd page and make corrections. When they've finished that work and every page has been validated by 2 people, the book's now available as a digital book. And as you can see from the side here, it's available to download by anyone as an EPUB, as a MOBI, or as a PDF. And what that means is that we can put it into our catalogue. So we've uploaded this ebook to our own catalogue, and we can make as many copies available as we'd like. And it's now available for loan in the whole South Island Consortium and Overdrive. Any of you could do this with your own library collections and indeed with some of the ebooks that we've digitized. I blogged about all this process in a blog called Digital Westland, where I talk about how Wikisource works and the workshop we ran in February, how to release a book's copyright for open use, and how to name photographs properly, and plenty more beside.